Welcome to the Seeing Red podcast with Andy Turner and Garrett Fulce, checking up on Texas policies and politics with some federal issues thrown in, like the assault weapons ban, interest rate hikes, you get it, but it's mostly Texas, since we can't ignore the big stuff either. And now, here are your hosts, Andy Turner and Garrett Fulce.
Welcome back to the Seeing Red podcast. I'm your host, Garrett. Co-host Andy Turner is out sick today, but we do have a wonderful guest joining us. That's going to be Jacey Jetton, representative out of Fort Bend County, Richmond. I'm going to introduce him shortly, but what's great is we had an off-tempo kind of special edition that came out last Friday with Senator Drew Springer to talk about some news he made. So you want to make sure you like and subscribe to this video. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, because those fast breaking ones are always going to go on YouTube first. So make sure you like and subscribe us on YouTube, follow us on the podcasting platforms, all that fun stuff. You also want to follow us on social media. All of our social media handles are at the Seeing Red Pod. So please go ahead and follow us on social media. We're very active on Twitter, and we're pretty active on Facebook, and we're getting everything else started. So, I mentioned Drew Springer and JC, representative of Fort Bend County. You have a Drew Springer connection. I believe you were was it legislative director for him a few years back?
Yeah, Garrett, good to be on with you. I was his legislative director his freshman year back in 2013 when he was first elected to state rep.
That's awesome. Well, you have a pretty great resume as well. You're a seventh generation Texan, son of Korean immigrant, and the son of a Korean immigrant. You represent Fort Bend County, which is the most diverse county in America. I would know. I live here as well. And you were appointed the chair of the Appropriations Article 2 subcommittee. You can serve on redistricting, public health, and the local and consent calendars. In the first session, which was the 87th, you were voted Freshman of the Year by your peers, and you love to support policies that ensure Texas remains the best place to pursue the American dream. You have your wife, and Fanny, and you own a small business in Fort Bend County, and your two boys are in school in Fort Bend as well. They're pretty good football player. One's a pretty good football player, and the other one's pretty good at is it karate, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, some sort of martial art.
Jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Awesome.
Jiu-jitsu, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, JC, thank you so much for joining us. A little fun fact. JC and I met JC when I worked on the governor's campaign, and I was sent to help him win his first general election. He didn't need much help from me in particular. He already had a great campaign team and great volunteer base. And while I was there, that's where I met my wife. And now that's why I live in Fort Bend County again. So I always kind of give JC and his wife Fanny a lot of credit for making that connection happen. So thank you. I genuinely appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, bringing people together.
I saw you. I think the last time I saw you was when the governor came to Fort Bend to speak at an endorsement rally for you, to kind of support your candidacy and kind of talk about the awesome record you have. I know that the governor kind of his two or three biggest priorities this year were doing more to secure the border and getting to ESAs passed. And I know you were a big player in the House to help get those things done. Can you want to talk a little bit more about how you worked with the governor and what you did to help secure the border and what you're working to do to get ESAs across the finish line?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just going back to when we first met, I think it was in 2019 when we were running that giant regular election campaign where in our district, Biden won by 4 points, and we were able to win down ballot by 4 points. And it took a lot of effort from people like you, and it was very, very helpful to have the governor on the team early on to get to work with him. The border has been a big deal ever since then. And when you look at Biden coming into office in 2020 or 2021. It was March of 2021 when we had the Operation Low start up. We had the regular session going on as well, and we had to appropriate $5.5 billion to go towards Operation Lone Star and to go towards the tactical barriers and all the different things that Texas was starting to launch to secure our border because of the massive influx of people that were starting to come over as soon as Biden was elected. This continued on until through last year during our regular session, where we appropriated another $5.1 billion in our general appropriations bill, and then carried on into the third and fourth special sessions, where I carried SB 3, which added $1.54 billion towards the border wall and towards overtime pay for Operation Lone Star. We also increased penalties for smuggling and stash houses, which is huge for crippling the cartel's ability to move people across the state, and then made it illegal to enter the state of Texas illegally. This is going to allow DPS to apprehend people as soon as they come over the border. A judge will be able to try them. They'll serve jail time and be pushed back over the port of entry back into Mexico. That makes Texas the least desirable state to run illegals through, and will force the cartels to go through other states. And this means when New Mexico, Arizona, and California are starting to take the influx of all those individuals that were coming through Texas, this administration is not going to be able to ignore it anymore. It's no longer a Texas problem, and I think that the Biden administration starts to respond differently. And I'll just add those two bills that were talked about, the smuggling and the illegal entry, both of those go into effect March 5th. And so we're still waiting for those laws to have their full impact. And in the meantime, the governor is throwing everything he can at the Biden administration to prevent them from stopping us from doing what Texas has to do.
Yeah. So I know I've been down to the border a few times and have seen, just not even on a tour or anything, just seeing people run across in different areas. It's a crazy amount of people that are coming across. I saw something today that said something like 40,000 people have gone to Denver over the past year, and that they are just plumb full. And I think there have been times where thousands of people have come into cities of less than 40,000 people, like Eagle Pass, like on a daily basis, all at once. And it's just, to me, it's one of these things where, since the governor started the busing, since then, this issue has flipped on its head, and Democrats can no longer, in other states, just, put up a sanctuary city sign and call it a day. They have to practice what they preach a little bit, and now they're looking at the ramifications of their policies. And it's one of these things where, you're right, the what y'all have done in the legislature to bolster what the governor can do as the executive has been a fantastic tool in that fight to curb this humanitarian, militaristic, whatever, the crisis that is at the border, whatever, however you want to describe it. Talk a little bit more about what you're seeing whenever you've gone down there, and about, have you been to the Shelby Park, the one that's at the center of all of this? Do you know, or can you talk a little bit more about that in particular?
Sure. So I've been down to the border 3 times. One to the Shelby area, one time towards the Roma, Texas, which is the most violent area, and then last time towards Brownsville, where we signed the bills with the governor. That large park at Eagle Pass, Shelby Park, it was a useful grounds for the Border Patrol to bring people in, organize them, and process them through. The problem is that they're ushering them through, processing them, and then letting them back into the through the state of Texas, and that's where the state of Texas is saying no more. Operation Lone Star is tasked with intercepting those trying to cross the border and pushing them back. And so, the Border Patrol's, their guidance from feds is to usher them in and process them. And so Operation Lone Star, the directives of the state of Texas, is what should prevail. And now that the invasion clause and the Constitution has been invoked, and the state of Texas is prevailing over the federal guidance on that, we're going to make sure that the Border Patrol can't continue to misuse land here in Texas. We're going to push people back. It's unacceptable.
Well, it kind of leads me to my next question, which is, we are in the middle of primary season. It's 5 weeks away, 6 weeks away? I can never remember because time's a blur now that I have a newborn. but we're into the silly season where the people just start throwing whatever's at the wall and hoping something sticks. It seems as if there's a group of people kind of led by groups funded by Tim Dunn and the Wilkes brothers, and typically operated by your Maciases and your Sticklins, those types that seem to be kind of hammering on a few different issues across the board. The one most notable for you, though there are a couple others, I think, is this. There's an allegation about gender modification or something. There was a bill you passed, and that Representative Tinderholt tried to pass an amendment to that was, I don't believe it was germane, which basically means it wasn't part of the caption, and then it was superfluous. I think it was something that was redundant. But can you talk a little bit more about that issue in your race and kind of what you're seeing on the ground?
Yeah, no, it's been extremely frustrating, the games that that side has been playing with what they know is truth. When you look at Senate Bill 14, which banned child gender modification in the state of Texas, is passed by the House, Senate, and signed into law in Texas, that there is no more child gender modification in Texas. Like, that is the law now. And to try and convince voters that, hey, this, don't mind the fact that it's already a law. Look at this amendment over here. He voted against this amendment, and it's the games that they play on the floor. I'll just tell you. So House Bill 1898 was the bill that I was carrying, which provided construction funds to children's hospitals to be able to build, transition, or expand out mental health emergency centers. And so if your child was having a psychotic breakdown, attempted suicide, you were able to take your child to a local children's hospital where they will be able to stabilize your child. Nothing to do with gender modification, gender dysphoria, or anything like that. This is for stabilizing children. Tinderholt pulled me aside on the floor after getting off the phone with his people, and said, "Look, I'm gonna push this amendment. I know it has nothing to do with your bill. I know that Senate Bill 14 is going to pass, but this is for primary attacks later." I told him, no, we were not going to make law based on political games, and this amendment had nothing to do with the bill. And so, I told him no. We fought for that on the House floor, and they recorded the votes as such, and now they're attacking us on it. But this is how those games are played on the House floor, and I call it part of the swamp. When you talk about what the swamp actually is in Austin, it's those that are playing games with the lawmaking process so that they can attack you during primaries. And they got a handful of puppets on the floor that they call and say, hey, run this amendment to cause disruption and chaos on the floor and to confuse voters during the primary season. That's just the truth of it.
Yeah. What Tinderholt is kind of loves to go up and do point of orders and point of informations and kind of just generally gum up the works of any legislation. He doesn't have any votes behind him. I think he got 2 votes for speaker. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a Republican Party of Texas rule that says that the Republicans have to back the candidate that wins in the conference vote?
That's right. So the grassroots of Texas during the convention said that, hey, no more of this Strauss elections. The House Republican caucus, you vote on who that House member is going to be, that is going to be your speaker nominee, and you back them, because it needs to be the Republicans that decide who the speaker is in the state of Texas when we're in control. And they overwhelmingly voted for Phelan, and and Tinderholt defied the will of the caucus, defied the will of the grassroots, decided to run still, and I think he had 3, but the other guy was expelled for inappropriate relations with one of his interns. And so
right, so now he has 1 supporter, though I think he might have picked up a couple. There's always room over there to make a little campaign cash to take those phone calls that you mentioned. But the I think it's interesting that right now the Republican Party of Texas is moving and likely will censure the speaker this week, but they didn't take any action against Tenderholt, who openly defined one of their most important rules that they say is one of their most important rules. It's why they are so angry at Phelan, quote unquote.
Yeah, no, I think the unfortunate thing right now is there is big money in Republican politics, and the way you make that money is by causing chaos in the Republican Party. These attempts to take out incumbents who have conservative records that you have to attack with fake amendments and different things. This is all part of the money making scheme of the consultants that are on the Dunn side, and unfortunately, too much so for the Republican Party of Texas. When you look at what the conservative victories have been over the last two sessions under Phelan's leadership, and you talk to the average voter of, hey, here's all we did on pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, securing the border, lowering property taxes, all the different things, and we go over and just, what is it that didn't pass that you wanted to pass? Most Republicans believe that, gosh, I mean, we've done a lot, and there's a lot more to do. We're never done. This fight never ends. But there's no question that we have a conservative Speaker of the House right now, Speaker Phelan, and he's been a great leader in terms of making sure that the conservative cause is accomplished here in the state of Texas.
Absolutely. What would you say? Oh, well, we had Mark McCaig on our last regularly scheduled podcast last Wednesday, and he talked a little bit about how the Republican Party of Texas is trying to use the legislative priorities that passed at the convention as a cudgel against members, even though y'all passed everything except school choice, which there was definitely a hard attempt at it, and there were some folks who didn't do it. So y'all took all their priorities, but here's my question: whenever you're going out to vote on an issue, or whenever you're looking to carry legislation, are you looking at what the priorities are first and foremost from what the activists at the convention and the grassroots at the convention put out, or are you kind of balancing that with what you're hearing from your constituents and what you're hearing at the door, and kind of what are you hearing at the door now?
Sure, and I think it's important to remember that we are a republic, that we elect people to represent us, and that from day one, I have identified myself as a strong Christian conservative. I have stood strong on that, and that is what I make my votes based on. And the voters, they get to decide is do my values and principles line up with theirs. When we are making decisions on the floor, it is based on those values and principles that I espoused during my elections that I carry into my votes on the floor. And everybody else should be doing the same thing. And it should be fair and consistent. And, the voters get to decide what, holds accountable if we get off of those values and principles that we're elected on. Another important thing that I think, it is known by the people that are on the attack, but is worthy of reminding is the founders of Texas put into the Constitution that there will be 100 members in the House to be able to conduct business. We have 86 Republicans. It's not hard to do the math to figure out that you're going to need some Democrats to participate in the process for us to be able to do anything in the House. And if the tables were turned, we would want that same ability to stop pro-abortion bills and different things. But the same tool that we could use if the table flipped is used today to make sure that the House is a place that must be member driven, that you couldn't have a speaker that ruled the day and only needed 76. When you need 100 members, you don't have the same ideological precision that you can find within the Senate, where everybody gets a chairmanship and everybody's got to play ball to be able to get anything done. And so I just thought that was worthwhile mentioning.
Well, I think it wasn't just that the 100 to conduct business, but it's 100 to pass most of the amendments. And so much stuff in Texas has to be passed by amendment, or it won't get passed how our Constitution is written. Can't get basically any tax cut without it going to the voters, which means it has to go through a 2/3 majority of both houses. So if you're listening to this and you're like, why do we have dim chairs? or why do we have like Democrats have any part of this process? It's because you need 100 votes to get a tax cut. At the end of the day, if you ever want a tax cut again, you need to have some leverage for the Democrats to actually show up to Austin.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So, I mean, people are like, "Oh, I've never heard a good reason." It's like, well, that's a pretty good reason for me. Tax cuts. I like those.
And by the way, if we can ever get to 100 members, we can change the Constitution, changing the quorum limits, and then we can do whatever we want on our side. But just remember, 1994 is when we took office, or when Republicans took over, and it wasn't that long ago. And we have to make sure that we're maintaining this state for Republican control for the foreseeable future, for future generations.
Well, let's also remember that there are billions, well, hundreds of millions of dollars that have come into this state to fight Republicans in primaries instead of fighting to beat Democrats to get to that 100 vote threshold. So
that's right.
If you want to think about it, yes, I think that's good whenever there is iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. I believe that primaries are generally pretty good for the health of a party, but I do not think that that's the case with how things are going currently. I just don't see that being the case with how these types of primaries are going on just for whatever else. And it's weird being in Fort Bend because I had lived here from 2005 to 2008, and it was ruby red, and it was it created what it is now, and now it's 52-48 Democrat, and it's about 50-50 judges, 3-2 split on the county court of commissioners. It is as purple as you can get in Texas that I can see, and it seems like you're right where we and even at the local level in Fort Bend, there's so much infighting where and you see this persist and outside of purple counties. You see it mostly in red counties, but you also see it in blue counties where more people care more about how they're viewed at a Republican meeting or a Republican club than they do about winning elections. Yeah. And it's really disheartening whenever you're going out and you're trying to recruit people to go knock on doors, or you're trying to get your candidates across the finish line, and people are so worried about whether or not they're more worried about like how a resolution is going to pass or not at a county commissioners meeting, or not county commissioner, a county executive committee meeting. And it really shows where the priorities of the people in the party are, and I would say the party leadership, not necessarily the representatives or the people who want to see Republican initiatives pass, but the people who are actually involved in party politics and their priority seems to be more about just what looks good on Facebook and Twitter so that they can get likes and retweets.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's a lot more focus right now on dividing the party versus figuring out how we're going to grow it and how we're going to start winning counties like Fort Bend County again. That helps us ensure that we keep Texas Republican. And until we start focusing on those things that the everyday Texan cares about, I think we're heading the wrong direction.
Yeah, as a party, for sure. We've held the line for the past since 2020. We've basically held around 83 to 85 seats in the House. I think we lost the seat or held in the Senate. We're trending in the wrong direction. We need to come back, and we should have had a blowout win last time. The governor and the statewide did great, but it's just one of these issues where we just aren't doing what we need to do to recruit people to go do the fundamental elements of what it is needed to be to campaign. We're not campaigning. The party is spending more time arguing about what a Republican is than going and beating Democrats. They don't put, there's nothing in infrastructure for election integrity. That division's been closed down at the state party. They're not, the victory funds being pretty much, I think, entirely funded by the RNC. They're doing almost no fundraising outside of talking to the Wilkes and the Dunns of West Texas. And at the end of the day, we don't have infrastructure to help Republicans win seats, marginal seats that Democrats are clinging on to along the border and in some of these suburban areas where we could take those areas back. But the party doesn't have the resources to even recruit candidates, let alone run candidates.
Yeah. And on the heels of the two most conservative sessions in Texas history, we were having to fight lies and rumors in the primary season again, instead of talking to those new voters that are moving here that we need to win over, preserve Texas for our party.
Well, I asked if you were hearing anything about the impeachment at the door. I know I see people from your campaign team ask me to come out and help all the time. I have, with the newborn, I am taking this one off because we're trying not to, in the preemie, we're trying to protect his lungs through flu season. But I see that you're out there all the time. And I see that you're out there all the time, which is, I love to see with a candidate actually out knocking doors. What are you hearing? What are the topics you're hearing at the door? Like, what is the issues that are driving the conversation for Republican voters that are actually like the typical ordinary Republican voter right now?
No, absolutely, and it makes sense. I'm so glad that your baby's doing good. We primarily, the two biggest things is the border and property taxes, and those are two things that it's easy to go to the door and talk about. My opponent is trying to say that I fought against the border, but I think everything shows to the contrary. And my opponent's also saying that I'm fighting for higher property taxes despite $18.1 billion property tax relief bill, and all the other efforts that we've made to lower property taxes here in Texas. And we're not done. When I talk to voters and we talk about the $18.1 billion in property tax relief, the place we need to get to is the removal of the M&O portion of the school property tax. And when we talk about cutting people's property taxes in half, that's a big deal. And then from there, we can look at where else can we start cutting back? Where else can we start replacing with higher sales tax? But when you try and compare Texas to the other southern states, which my opponent is trying to has a mailer out there that we're higher than 5 other southern states that all have income taxes. Right. And so if we not only are we competing with them on property taxes, but we don't have an income tax, and that's why people are moving to Texas. And so we're going to keep on fighting on that. I hear a lot about that issue, and then the rest is whatever people are closest to. Education and crime are the two other big ones. Public education here in my district, especially, we have Katy ISD, Fort Bend ISD, and Lamar Consolidated ISD. All great school districts. I got all three of them, and they're great school districts. People move to Fort Bend County, to this area, because of these school districts. And we have worked hard to work with those board members and superintendents to ensure that they're getting the support they need from the state, and that they're safe environments for teachers and for the kids. And we're able to talk in depth with voters about that. And then also when it comes to keeping our community safe, making sure that we're going after rogue DAs and getting our judges back in the courtroom, putting people behind bars, and working on bail reform, and making sure that cities can't defund their police departments here in Texas, and so forth. We have stood strong with our law enforcement. We had the endorsements of CLEAT and TMPA, and fortunately, in two terms, we have been able to fight for those things and win on those things that the people, and especially House District 26, really care about. And we're going to keep on fighting on those.
Some representatives serve 4 terms and get 1 bill out if they're lucky. Thinking famously of Jonathan Stickland, and I think he got 1. I think he got red light cameras done in his last term. He finally passed the bill. He removed them. I don't want to speak. But looking at your record, you have authored, co-authored, sponsored, and co-sponsored so many I couldn't go through them all. And there's a lot of stuff where you talked about the border. You carried a lot of the election integrity legislation, I believe, in the 87th. That was really the reform year for the election code. What bill that's kind of, I mean, what's the bill you're most proud of so far? Which one was the most difficult to get passed, or that you think is the, you don't get to talk about enough because no one ever asks you about it?
Sure. Gosh, there's probably 3 that really come to mind. That election integrity bill was huge.
Mhm.
I was elected, so it was 2020, not 2019 earlier. I misspoke. So 2020, we go into 2021, that first regular session, and people had major concerns about the elections process.
Mhm.
And I told the speaker early on that, listen, as a former county chairman of the Republican Party, I know how elections work. And so I had an opportunity to get on elections committee, work with Chairman Briscoe Kane and others to really write so much of what ended up in the elections omnibus bill that ended up passing. It took a couple of special sessions. I was there speaking on the floor when everyone walked out. All the Democrats walked out in the final days of the regular session. But finally getting that across the finish line was just an amazing victory that took multiple sessions and so much hard work, and I learned so much about how outside influences play a role in what gets passed and what happens on the in Texas House. Just real quick, I mean, it was when we talk about that bill before the Democrat walkout, I had Democrats that I could sit down with and go through the bill, and they would agree that, hey, this is a good bill. Like, this is a good, fair bill. It doesn't do what the media says it does. Doesn't do what Biden says it does. And but because of the DNC, just could not get on board with it and had to join the walkout. The appropriations bill this year, getting to work with, or last year, getting to work with Chairman Bonin and getting to be an Article 2 chair and be on the conference committee for the appropriations bill that controls all the funding for the state of Texas was a very cool experience. We got to do a lot of stuff on there, dealing with making sure that we're taking care of our foster kids and everything else DFPS does to ensure that families are staying together. Because that's really where's the best situation for any child, and then also getting to deal with HHSC funding and dishes, but also the border infrastructure. It was great, great opportunity to serve on that, and then getting to carry Senate Bill 3 during the third and fourth special sessions that funded the $1.54 billion for the border wall infrastructure. Talk about first, we were the first state to go and bus people around. We're also the first state in U.S. history to ever construct its own border wall. And to add another $1.54 billion towards it to get us through 2025, and hopefully we'll make the right decision this November, and Texas won't have to invest all that it has had to over the last couple of sessions. But if we have to, we can pick right back up on the next regular session and provide more funding to keep that border wall moving.
Fantastic. I think that's a good note to end on, but I will open up the floor a little bit, or just to let you do your final pitch. Like, what is the last thing you'd like? Since I live in Fort Bend County, this will go a little bit more broadly in your district than, say, other people who might come on the show. So if there's anything else you'd kind of like to talk to the voters in your district, what's kind of your closing pitch for this primary election?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you allowing me to come on. I've enjoyed the conversation. There's a lot that happens in Texas politics that is messy and grimy, and we unfortunately have primaries going on not only here in House District 26 but across the state. That's all coordinated efforts to what I consider lie and take seats from very conservative members with conservative backgrounds. I mean, when you are trying to lie and take out Briscoe Kane as a rhino, I think we've come to a weird place in Texas politics, Republican politics. And so, the truth is out there. The truth should prevail. And, and where the truth prevails, I think we get to go back and work on important issues to Texans that, includes those things that people care about: keeping our community safe, securing the border, lowering property taxes, and, all the other major issues that not only keeps us a conservative Republican state, but also the things that people care about that will keep on electing Republicans in office.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you at home for coming with us to our first regularly scheduled video podcast. Well, we've been audio only, so thank you or if you're listening to us on audio, check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/the Seeing Red Pod to see the video podcast and follow us there so you can get stuff a little bit sooner. We really appreciate you joining us. Make sure to drop us a like and a follow wherever you listen. And if you want to contact us or at the show, it's hosts, HOSTS, at seeingredpodcast.com. Shoot us a message and we'd love to get back to you. But otherwise, we'll see you next week unless more news happens. All right. Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Seeing Red podcast. It's always Texas politics and beyond. We present the facts and opinions. The Seeing Red podcast with your host, Andy Turner and Garrett Fulce. Thank you, and tune in next week. And please do us a favor, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.